Please subscribe my channel. I never imagined that the life I had built with Melissa would gradually feel like a never-ending cycle of being pushed aside. When we first fell in love, it was intoxicating, full of laughter, warmth, and a connection that made me feel like we were made to belong together. We would stay up late into the night, sharing dreams, making plans, and simply enjoying those quiet, intimate moments that seemed to anchor us to each other. Back then, I believed that our desire for one another would never fade. But over time, things changed in ways I could not have anticipated. At first, I brushed off the subtle signs. A headache here, a stressful day there, a simple, "Not tonight, I'm tired," whispered with apparent exhaustion. I told myself it was normal. Everyone goes through phases. But soon, it became clear that this wasn't occasional. It had become a pattern. Each time I reached for her hand, leaned in for a kiss, or tried to pull her close at night, she would turn away. Sometimes she offered polite excuses, sometimes an impatient sigh, and sometimes there was nothing at all, just a deliberate turning of her back. The sting of that rejection cut deeper than I cared to admit. I convinced myself it was just stress, just a phase, that she would come around. But weeks stretched into months, and those excuses felt more like walls being built between us. Every stone in those walls chipped away at my confidence. I began to question myself. Had I become unattractive? Was there something wrong with me? Or worse, was my affection being redirected elsewhere while I was shut out? The hardest part wasn't merely the absence of intimacy. It was the way it made me feel invisible in my own home. I was still her husband, still present, still giving my best. Yet each time I reached out, I was reminded that my feelings, my needs, even my existence seemed secondary. Eventually, I stopped asking. Not because I didn't want closeness, but because I could no longer bear the repeated sting of being refused, the recoil, the cold distance that met my touch. Life, however, has a cruel irony. The same woman who had rebuffed me now came with requests, small errands, minor needs, things she wanted done. Could I pick up groceries? Fix the leaky sink? Handle a bill? Initially, I obliged as always, but inside, a sense of imbalance began to grow. She took freely, effortlessly, but returned nothing. Her comfort and convenience were always prioritized, while mine were pushed aside, left to fade. It was then I made a quiet decision, a subtle act of defiance. If she could disregard my needs, then I would mirror her behavior. The first time it happened, it was almost accidental. She asked me to run an errand after a taxing day, and instead of the habitual yes, I simply said, "I'm tired," and went to bed. The surprise on her face was unmistakable. She wasn't used to hearing no. That tiny act of refusal sparked something in me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the husband who surrendered his own comfort to maintain the peace. It felt unexpectedly freeing. Over the following weeks, I continued to reflect the treatment I had endured. When she came to me with requests, I shrugged, claimed I was busy, or simply ignored her. "Can you help with the laundry?" she would ask. "Not tonight," I replied without looking up. "Can you grab dinner?" I'd say I had no time. Even though I passed several restaurants on my way home, I wasn't trying to be cruel, nor seeking revenge. I just wanted her to see what it felt like to be disregarded, to have one's needs repeatedly minimized. At first, she dismissed it as a temporary change, a brief rebellion I would inevitably abandon. But as the days passed, her tone shifted. She started asking why I was behaving differently. "You never used to say no," she said, frustration evident in her voice. I met her gaze and let the weight of years of rejection speak for itself. I wasn't shouting or accusing, I was speaking the truth. The nights I spent awake, wondering what I had done wrong. The moments I swallowed tears to avoid appearing weak. The countless instances where all I craved was closeness, only to be met with cold distance. "What's going on with me?" I asked. "Melissa, what's been going on with us? For years, every time I tried to get close, you turned away. You shut me out. And now you're surprised that I don't jump at every request you make." She froze, confronted by the reflection of her own actions. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in her demeanor. She grew quieter, thoughtful, perhaps even regretful, but I couldn't be certain whether her reflection was on how she had treated me, or on the frustration of my newfound boundaries. For me, though, a transformation had occurred. I realized that intimacy and respect are intertwined in ways deeper than most acknowledge. Constant rejection doesn't merely diminish physical closeness. It erodes the very foundation of partnership. My refusal to bend wasn't vengeance, it was reclamation. I had given endlessly without receiving, and now I refused to be invisible any longer. I didn't know what lay ahead. Perhaps Melissa would awaken to the consequences of her actions. Perhaps she wouldn't. But for the first time in years, I felt clarity. If she desired my attention, my effort, my care, she needed to understand that I, too, deserved to be seen, valued, and loved. Marriage is not a one-sided transaction. It thrives on reciprocity, respect, and mutual desire. And until she recognized that, I would no longer bear the weight of both sides alone. At last, I wasn't the man pleading for closeness. I was the man who had reclaimed himself, who understood his worth, and who refused to let anyone make him feel small again.